to look at the 2016 new ride announcements for Six Flags and give you all of our opinions on them. And we're going to do it each park in under 4 minutes and 10 seconds. Just tonight, we are mixing the crew of COASTER-net Uncut and Beat the Beast, and we're going to use the format of Beat the Beast. And the general idea is that we only get 4 minutes and 10 seconds to discuss each individual topic. And each topic tonight will be the individual parks and what new rides they are getting. And you may be wondering, well, why 4 minutes and 10 seconds? Well, of course, 4 minutes and 10 seconds represents the total ride time of the great by some, overrated by others, Beast roller coaster at Kings Island is 4 minutes and 10 seconds, one of the longest roller coasters in the world for ride time, and that's where we get that number. If we beat the 4 minutes and 10 seconds, we are hashtag better than the Beast. If we don't beat the 4 minutes and 10 seconds, you'll hear this, and we are, of course, worse than the Beast. So tonight we're going to look at, like I said, the Six Flags announcements. But before we get into the parks, let's introduce who's here this evening. I am, of course, Andy Robarczyk from Chicago, Illinois, joined by both of my co-hosts for the other shows that I'm on. First, looking at Danny Miller from Rochester, New York.
Yes, this is going to be interesting for me because, you two guys do the Beat the Beast format. So, Andy, you're used to having the short-winded version of thing, and I'm used to doing what I'm doing now and being long-winded. So this is going to be interesting to try and fit all three of us now in 4 minutes and 10 seconds each. So I'm excited. I got my timer on my phone right here, so I'm going to try and I'm going to do my best.
You say interesting. I say challenging because you're going to be the issue tonight.
It's interestingly challenging.
Also joining us is the regular co-host of Beat the Beast. He is Dwayne Sponseller from Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Yeah, I tell you what, the challenging part is going to be the whole fact of can we do it, because the Beast kind of beats Andy and I every single time that we do the show. So I really don't think it's going to be any better because now we've added Danny to the situation, and if it's anything like Uncut, there's no way that we're ever going to beat the Beast.
You're not exactly upping your game at this point because you can't even beat it with the two of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, lucky for us, we have a number of topics tonight that may not generate a whole lot of discussion. So So on that note, I say let's get into it. Like I said, we're going to look at all the different parks of Six Flags, all 14 parks. So let's start first with Six Flags St. Louis. And, as always, we have to start the clock first, which is going to be the most challenging part on my part. Because we do usually 4 stories. I usually forget half the time to start the clock. So now with 14.
So you'll forget 7 times tonight.
Probably. So we're going to start the clock right now. And there you have the 4 minutes and 10 seconds. So at Six Flags St. Louis, they are getting a new, dare I call it a roller coaster. It's more of a flat ride, as we all know. It is the Fireball. It's one of those Larson loopers. So, Paddle, what is your opinion on Six Flags St. Louis here?
Well, I think basically everybody knows that there were 4 of these last year, and now there's 4 of them again this year. And I think Six Flags last year they were all called something different. We had Daredevil, we had El Diablo, we had the Bourbon Street Fireball, and the Joker Chaos Coaster. So this year they decided to call 3 of the 4 the Fireball. So they were like, oh, we were being a bit too unique last year by calling them all something different. So this year they're going with just Fireball and not calling them roller coasters in the video, but still calling them roller coasters in the press release. So they're kind of stepping their way around the enthusiasts. But Six Flags St. Louis was a big year for them last year with the Battle for Metropolis Dark Ride. So I guess it kind of makes sense that maybe they're going a little smaller this year. Dwayne?
I'm kind of surprised that they brought 4 back in. I mean, how long was it this year that they closed the ones down because of the issues that they had? So that was an interesting thing to me. I'm sure it was going to, this was in the plan all along. But I mean, are they going to regret this down the line when they realize all the problems that they've had? I mean, when they had to close them all down because of an issue. I mean, hopefully they've got it fixed before they've installed these, because most people are going to look at that and say, well, what kind of investment was that for Six Flags to do that? Also, the next question for me is, are they putting them in every park? They did 4 last year, 4 this year. Are we going to get to the other 4 next year? I mean, it definitely seems that's the way to go, in my opinion, for Six Flags.
Yeah, you look at it, and like I think of Six Flags Great America right away, who hasn't gotten one, and there's already a ready-made spot for it that I can think of where Raging Cajun used to stand. Larson Loop would fit perfectly in there. They could actually use the same theme that they used at Six Flags America last year with the the Mardi Gras idea, so it would fit nicely in there. And to be honest, I know a lot of enthusiasts get all bent out of shape over the coaster concept, and I know there's a separate argument to be made here for, this is kind of just like a fair ride, and people are upset that they're putting them in parks. But at the same time, you have people complaining about the lack of flat rides inside a lot of these parks. And this is actually increasing that count for them, where some of these parks need something like that. And like we were talking about in the pre-show, if they put a Larson Loop in Six Flags Great America, it's going to have a line on it. And every time that ride has a line means that people are going to that line, which I probably don't want to ride, and less people are going to another ride that I do want to ride. So for me, it would work out where it distracts people, gives people something else to do in the park, that I can go ride the stuff that I want to ride. And and that's the way I look at it. It's a cheap investment by Six Flags. You hear the number of 750,000 thrown around a lot. So for less than $1 million to get a new flat ride like that,
it's pocket change.
Exactly. It's a good investment. I'm not saying it's an amazing ride. I'm not saying that I want to see these things in the park, but I understand why they're doing it, and it looks like they're doing it all over the place too. So
I think it's a good thing for St. Louis. I mean, they just got what they got last year, with the dark ride and what have you.
It makes sense.
I mean, in this case,
not Great Adventure.
Now, the problem with St. Louis is they took out a ride to put this in, so it's a flat for a flat, which kind of is a break even, and it's like, you know what, we need to add more rides to that park to get their
That was your last point anyway, right?
Yeah, it was. But luckily for us, if you have any more points on Larson Loopers, just save them for Great Escape that's coming up.
We've got 3 more chances.
We've got 3 more chances to talk about it. That's what's great. So the next park we're going to talk about is Six Flags America in Washington. So if we could start that clock once again, and there you have it. This one got a water park expansion that, from all intents and purposes, basically looks like it's a play area with one of those huge buckets that pours water on people. Some kiddie slides, generally a kids area. So not a ton going on there at Six Flags America. Right. Any thoughts on this? I really have nothing. Okay, but it's kind of, the one thing I will say is Six Flags America, it's kind of a disappointment from the fact that they've gotten a lot of relocations recently. They got the Larson Loop last year. So not a lot going on down there, and it's kind of a market that I think they could be capitalizing on more, but they're not, and I don't know why.
See, Six Flags America is kind of weird because you're right. It's in that big market. You got Washington D.C., you've got Baltimore, you've got Harrisburg to a certain extent, although most of their people go to Hershey. Kings Dominion is kind of the real big player in that particular region, and even Busch Gardens more so. A lot of people from Washington and Baltimore go down to Busch Gardens. So Six Flags America has always kind of seemed like the ugly stepchild that people always talk bad about. But when they actually visit the park, they're like, I didn't think it was all that bad. Yeah. There's just a lot of empty space, and stuff is spread out. Like you said, they've had a couple relocations. the water park has always been the big thing there. Every time we go down to Six Flags America, it's empty, but the water park is packed. So I guess the water park, a few years ago, they got those bonsai pipeline things as well. So they've been adding to the water park fairly consistently. And whenever they do get a ride, it's usually a little bit on the cheap. It's a smaller ride, or it's a relocation where it's really just, it's the cost to move it from park to park. Yeah. So at the end of the day, this is an addition that I'm not excited for. I'm not a water park guy really at all, but I guess it kind of makes sense why they're going that route, because the water park is the popular half of the park there.
I'm in total agreement with Danny, because when Andy and I were down there a couple of years ago, of course, we went when it was 120-some degrees outside, so everybody was in the water park. But it seems like the more and more I read things online and talk to people, that's where everybody flocks to. And, I mean, there's really, to me, not a lot in the actual park that excites me. Like you said, it's not a disappointing park, but there's just not a lot there. And if I can take another couple-hour drive down to King's Dominion, I'm going to do it, because there's going to be so much more. Plus, if I just go there, I can drive another 40 minutes and be in Williamsburg. So I think that the location does hurt it in the long run, because people are going to say, well, there's not a lot there. And if I'm not a water park person, I'm just going to continue to move farther down the coastline a couple hours to where I'm going to have at least a better day and more variety of what I want to do.
Okay, so I think that time we did indeed beat the Beast. And moving along to staying in the same vein here, so if we could start that clock once again at 4 minutes and 10 seconds. The next park is Whitewater down in Atlanta, the standalone water park that Six Flags owns. And they are putting in the Wahoo Racer, which is a more elaborate mat racer. It has some twists at the top that turns into the normal turnarounds, and then down the double drop.
The Kraken slide, I think a lot of people call them.
Yeah,
the Kraken racer or something like that.
It seems like a really good addition. It seems like a pretty cool water slide. That the mat racers are always the most fun, I think, at a water park, and these with the little spirals that they have at the top, I think it makes it even more fun. For those people. Once again, probably a good addition. What do you guys think?
I mean, it's kind of the same thing as Six Flags America in my book, as far as it goes. I think the big thing you got to realize that this is an independent water park that's not really on. They made a big deal about Six Flags Over Georgia getting a Hurricane Harbor a few years back. So I don't know if maybe that took away from some of Whitewater's business. I haven't been to Whitewater. We just went to Six Flags Over Georgia. I don't know how far away they are, so I don't know what their business is really.
They are on completely opposite sides of the city. Whereas Six Flags Over Georgia, I believe, is south west.
It's north.
No, I thought it was southwest of Atlanta, and then Whitewater's north of Atlanta. So they're on complete whatever it might be.
One of them's north, one of them's south. Yeah, I don't even know.
It's flip-flop. So
at the end of the day, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how their business models overlap and whatnot. And you would think that it does make more sense for them to have the water park on property at Six Flags Over Georgia, because you might get the people to go back and forth. So I don't know exactly. I don't know what the draw is here. I'm assuming that they're seeing a spike in attendance at Hurricane Harbor and seeing a slight drop in attendance at Whitewater. So maybe they're looking to kind of even the playing field out again. I don't really know. I haven't looked at attendance numbers, but again, me not being much of a water park guy, it's kind of a moot point for me at this point.
I kind of get the sense that people generally do not travel for water parks, that most people like to stay extremely local with water parks. So by having them on complete opposite sides of the city, I think you're drawing from two completely separate markets. Whereas a theme park, the investments are so heavy that there's no way you could really have two theme parks. Like, you can, but it wouldn't make sense in the same company. Here, I think the investments are kind of minimal, and the overall return is usually pretty high. So I think it makes sense. Dwayne, you haven't said anything yet.
Well, I mean, we were down in Atlanta here this past year, and the last thing that Over Georgia got was they got a Chaos Coaster last year,
yes.
or
and the Tilt Whirl,
right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I can understand maybe, the direction that they were going, and maybe to Danny's point, maybe that they were having a declining, attendance, and maybe they're going to try and put some money into that. But then again, Atlanta's such a big city, and who's going to travel across, that city to go to a water park if there's one in your, just right down the street per se. So I don't know. Like I'm not a water park person either. I don't think the three of us, truly are. I mean, I will go when if it's extremely hot, but that's not what I'm really in the mood for most of the time. But yeah, I'm guessing that sometimes you have to do it. You've got to keep that side of the crowd happy as well. And I'm sure this is something that people are going to look forward to, especially those who frequent the water park on a daily and weekly basis.
Absolutely. That time we beat the Beast again, just by a nick there, by only about 10 seconds. The next part
by a trim break.
By a trim break. The next park we're going to look at is actually Six Flags Over Georgia, so let's start that clock again. And this one is really interesting because I think this one kind of came out of nowhere, for me at least, where I didn't really hear a lot. And it's basically they're retheming they're redoing their kids' areas, retheming some, adding a whole bunch of rides to another. So you have the Bugs Bunny Boomtown, and then you have the DC Super Friends. One common theme we see this year is a lot of DC stuff coming into the parks. Of course, that's why I'm wearing my Aquaman shirt tonight, because supporting the DC comics. But this one's really interesting because they're adding some flying eagles. They're adding a mini drop tower. I shouldn't say mini, but one of the smaller drop tower, something like on the size level that you would see at Waldemere or Knoebels.
It's the same model that Knoebels has, I think.
Okay, and then they're also adding one of those. They had those spinning rides with the water soakers that we saw St. Louis and La Ronde get. This is a smaller version of that as well. So actually, some pretty interesting additions that are pretty good for the whole family there, which is, I think, an area that a lot of parks miss. That you either have kiddie rides or you have adult rides, but it's that middle area that everyone can do together. And here you have 3 rides that everyone can do together, and I kind of like it, and I definitely like the new themes. And supposedly their kiddie coaster is being rethemed to the Joker Funhouse, which if you were at Over Georgia this year, you might have noticed that the kiddie coaster was closed for a significant portion of the season. I know we were there in July and it was closed, and it was closed a few weeks later when my sister went down. So I don't know if it's been closed the whole time, but obviously they're retheming it, which I think that is one of the best kiddie coasters anywhere. I know some people out there hate kiddie coasters and will not ride them, but if you ride one kiddie coaster in a theme park, it is that one, because I think that one has the most kick to it. So I'll throw it to you guys right now.
Yeah, that one definitely has the most kick to it. Certainly a nice size, and it's a little awkward because it kind of ends with the lift hill with the tires to kind of push back up to the station because the station starts out really high. As far as the rides go, I think maybe we start to see a little bit of a change in direction from Six Flags, hopefully, where they focus a little bit more on family stuff and maybe become a little bit more well-rounded. Maybe this is a step in that direction, because the big complaint about Six Flags Over Georgia always was their lack of flat rides. And, that's always been the big deal. We talked about with the Loopers a minute ago. So now that they're getting, I think, 12 new rides overall in here, that's a lot of good flat rides that, we could probably ride some of them, and, the kids could ride with parents as well. So it's going to be a good mix. And you talked about the DC Comics. We're going to talk a lot tonight about DC Comics. So the DC Super Friends is a popular brand name right now. When I worked at Fisher Price, a few years ago for one of my school internships, that was a big line in the Imaginext line, so we know that DC and DC Super Friends is popular. So, Dwayne, you got a few seconds here. Why don't you give us some thoughts, too?
Yeah, well, to your point about the kiddie coaster, I'm more infatuated with the one that's next door, the 3 lift hill ride. That is my favorite mine ride of all.
Oh yeah, the Dahlonega Mine Tree.
Yeah, well, we won't get into that. But if we go back to the rides that we were talking about, it seems like the Flyers are coming back. We're starting to see them added in so many parks.
Ridiculousness. I can't stand it. I can't stand the Flyers. Like they aren't like, okay, if it's a kiddie ride, fine, but I find them completely uninteresting from top to bottom. Like
they're okay if they're run right.
None of them are. Sorry, Dwayne, but you don't get any else thing to say. So
I don't have anything to say anyway.
Never does.
Hey, don't blame me. Blame the Beast. Don't blame me. If
Should have added some more trim brakes. Give Dwayne some more time to talk.
Or at least a third lift hill in there. Just put a third lift hill in there somewhere to
like the Galaga restraint
system.
There you go.
A great restraint system.
Okay, so the next part.
I love when you get airtime where your knees hit the bottom of the lap bar.
Dwayne was in so much pain on that trip. It was hysterical.
Best ride at Six Flags.
I almost peed myself.
As we heard
Seriously.
Say.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so the next park is Six Flags Great America. So let's start that clock. And we just had the big discussion on Uncut last week about what the rumors were. Obviously, we said that it's very likely it's going to be a dark ride. It was a dark ride. To be honest,
we were right. Moving on.
Well, to reiterate what I said back then, it's a little bit of a disappointment that it's just going to be a complete clone for the most part. I thought that they might go down the road of a Batman versus Superman, being that movie is going to be super huge next year. So that's a bit of a disappointment, but generally, I like this for me because now I don't have to take a trip down to St. Louis just to ride it. And this is going to be a ride that I'm going to want to ride more than once. I love dark rides in general. I love shooting dark rides. This is going to be a ride I want to experience many times in my lifetime, and it's going to be at probably the closest big park to me, so I'm going to have that opportunity to ride this many, many times, and that's going to make me happy. So I am not upset by this addition at all. I think it's awesome. I thought it was an awesome idea last year. There's a little twinge of disappointment because it's a clone, but it's still, I think, a great addition for Six Flags Great America. And you know what? They can move Southwest Territory sign to a little bit further down by the boat ride, so I don't think that's going to be an issue either.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a cloned ride, but I think the general reviews are if the ride is operating. Now, we've heard here and there that sometimes the one at St. Louis is having some trouble staying open. But in general, the people who have ridden it and who have not had trouble riding it in terms of waiting in long lines or trying to wait for it to open back up, the people have really enjoyed it who have been on it. So it seems like now, the big discussion last year was the Battle for Metropolis and the Triotech Voyage to the Iron Reef, which is mostly media-based, whereas this is very animatronic and live set-based. And I think the general response is that if Battle for Metropolis was consistently open, it would be the better ride, but it's having a lot of downtime here and there, whereas Voyage to the Iron Reef has been running like a well-greased machine pretty much all season as far as I know. It was open the entire day we were there, and we loved it. So at the end of the day, this is a good...
Like, you mean like a well-greased steampunk octopus is what you meant to say.
Yeah, there we go. That's good. So at the end of the day, I think, Andy, you said last year when we discussed the Six Flags attractions, Wicked Cyclone and Twisted Colossus were the big ones, and then Batman. But the thing that was going to make it a success or not was whether or not the dark rides would be a success. And it sounds like for the most part they are, with a little bit of caveat that they're maybe having some bugs early on. So I think this year it has to be good for Great America because their whole lineup as a whole isn't as strong this year.
Yeah. Dwayne, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'd say that we're getting ready to hit the era of major dark ride installments at all parks at every level. I see that that's something that's coming down the line. We know Cedar Fair is going to be doing it. Six Flags has already started doing it, even though they're cloning it. But I really think it's something that's good for Great America. I was just up there with Andy for the first time this summer, and it doesn't seem like they have a lot of indoor type things where you can get out of the heat for a little bit or something of that nature. So I think, and with the fact that they have so many stadiums or theater type areas, they definitely could have gotten rid of a couple. And so I don't see this as a bad thing at all. I think it's going to be a great thing for the park. I did see a lot of teenagers and kids at that park, and so I think that's going to be something that these kids will enjoy as well. And again, it's one of those family things that everybody in the family can be a part of. It's still very good.
We'll let you talk first on the next one, because the next park we're going to be looking at is Six Flags Mexico, and guess what they're getting? They're getting a Battle for Metropolis too. So let's start the clock, and Dwayne, you can continue talking.
No, I don't know too much about what this park's laid out as because I've never been there. But if it's a clone, I guess we could say the same thing. But seriously, though, in all seriousness, I think these type of rides are what parks are wanting to do because they really want to get the family atmosphere back. I see that with Cedar Fair. I see that, and whether that be, with the fact of the new CEO coming from Disney and all that mess, if you want to believe that, whatever. But I think that they're really, in all of these parks, trying to bring back a more family atmosphere. You see that down the line. And I think that if that's what's going on with this dark ride era, that's what we're in for. We're just going to have to deal with it. But I'm interested. I want to ride. I want to get on one of these rides and ride it to see what it's like because, as Danny said, some people who are getting a chance to ride it say it's an extravagant thing.
Yeah. Danny, any thoughts on the Six Flags Mexico installation at all?
Not a whole lot to add for me. I mean, like I said, if it's operational and if it's running continuously, I think it's going to be a big success. I mean, that's always the case with new rides. I mean, very rarely do you have new rides come out and people say, I didn't like it, or, that ride was crap. I mean, most of the time you hear people say, oh, that was a great ride. That was one of the best rides I've been on. They've got a hit on their hands, all those stupid cliches that you hear at the media days and whatnot. And I think the one thing that I have that I think takes a little bit of points away from the Battle for Metropolis stuff is the fact that, like you said, Andy, it is all clones. And we're going to see the same thing over and over and over. And that eventually I'm going to get one at Great Adventure, and I'm not going to have to go to all these other parks. It's not going to be a big draw for me. When we went to California back in June, I was excited to go back to Knott's Berry Farm. I hadn't ridden Accelerator on my last trip. I was excited to re-ride Silver Bullet. I was excited to re-ride Ghost Rider. But I was super pumped up to ride Voyage to the Iron Reef and see what a kicked-up version of Wonder Mountain's Guardian was going to be like. And, we're going to Cedar Point tomorrow. Sue's over here with me. She's not a big fan of the shooter rides, and she loved Voyage to the Iron Reef. She's shaking her head at me now. She loved Voyage to the Iron Reef. I mean, I thought it was just so much better than Wonder Mountain's Guardian. I mean, 3 times as long. It was more immersive. So I think and the Cedar Fair parks are all going to have unique storylines. And that's where there's kind of the big difference right now. If Six Flags is going to get 8 of these Battle for Metropolis rides, and Cedar Fair is going to get 8 completely different Triotech rides, those Cedar Fair ones are going to be a lot more intriguing than a Battle for Metropolis ride in Mexico or in Chicago, because I've done it already. So I don't know. That's kind of where I stand up. But it's going to be a fantastic ride.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next park, which is Six Flags Magic Mountain. So let's start that clock once again. And this one was interesting. People are losing their shit over this one, which kind of surprises me. Literally, people are losing their shit. And it's basically what's happening is they're restoring Revolution to its original non-OTSR form. So they're doing new trains on it with new restraints. They're calling it the New Revolution. It's going to look great. It's Lord Anton Schwarzkopf, as people like to call him. It's a nice ride to begin with, but I don't remember Revolution being an out of this world coaster to begin with. And maybe it was because of the restraints were so painful that I kind of disregarded the ride. Because his other stuff, I think
it's the trim brakes more than anything.
Is it? Because I know his other stuff was amazing. Like Mindbender down at Over Georgia still holds up very well. I didn't get a chance to ride Shockwave at Over Texas when I was there, but usually his stuff's pretty good. So what are your thoughts? People are saying top 10 roller coaster. People are saying top 10 steel.
No, absolutely not. Here's my thing with Revolution. Revolution, I think, is one of those that is more iconic because it's been in movies and films, and you've seen it on television, and I think it's got a real historical aspect to it. People say that it was great when it only had the lap bars before it was the over-shoulder restraints. And, I said when we rode it back in June, I said, could you imagine if they took the shoulder harnesses off of this and took brakes off? This ride would be really, really good. And I don't know. I'm just really hoping that maybe we can see the trim brakes turned off, because I think that's what's really going to make a big difference with the ride quality as opposed to just taking off the shoulder harnesses. So we'll have to see where it goes. I really hope that they restore it to 1976 Revolution, where there's no trim brakes, no over-the-shoulder harnesses, as opposed to 1995 Revolution, where it's still got the regular trains, but you're still kind of just meandering your way through the second half of the course, because going through the woods, that's going to be a really exciting ride if you're not banging your head and you're actually going full speed. That would be a really fun ride.
Yeah, I haven't been on Revolution, so I can't really say a whole lot about this, but it did intrigue me because I liked Mindbender. That was the first Schwarzkopf that I was on. And so I was thinking of wanting to get on some other ones.
No, it wasn't. You're wrong. The Whizzer was the first one you were on.
Oh, that's right. Okay, you're right. So I forgot we did that first. So you got me on that one. I forgot about that. So I guess we did hit two. But I kind of like them both, actually, now that you said that. I kind of forgot about Whizzer. It took us forever to get on it. It was nice. The last thing we did. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about it because, like I said, I haven't been on it. But to redo it, to take it back to what it was, that's not something you see very often. Usually you see, the word revolution means usually a complete change, but to take it back to what it was at the beginning, it's not something you see. So I think that's an interesting aspect in the industry, because it's not, what happens to most coasters later on in their life.
Yeah. Okay. So we moving on to the next park, and we're back to the old tried and true here. Looking at the Great Escape. Let's start that clock. And we have another Larson Looper, this time with a unique name in Greased Lightning. I really don't have a lot to say on this. It's a park that needs more rides. This probably fits best in that park out of any of the Six Flags parks. But that's about all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of park that kind of has that carnival feel to it. Not because it's dingy or crappy, but because it's small and it has your family style rides. So I mean, it's a good addition for this park because it's not going to have ungodly long lines like it will at a Great Adventure. And it's going to be one of their better rides. It's going to be one of their more thrilling rides, one of their more exciting rides. I mean, they added that extreme supernova mini frisbee last year, which was pretty cool. I rode that when I went up there back towards the end of July. So at the end of the day, this is a good fit for that park, I think. And it makes the most sense there, and it makes sense at the smaller parks. It almost makes sense at St. Louis. It almost makes sense at Fiesta, Texas, which we're going to get to. And it makes sense here at Great Escape. It doesn't make sense at Six Flags Great Adventure. It doesn't make sense at Six Flags Over Georgia. So, I'll go as far to say that, but that's that's pretty much all I got on that front, I guess.
Dwayne, any additional ideas on the Larson Loop?
No, I mean, we've pretty much kind of circled this thing, no pun intended. But, I mean, the name is kind of, whatever. But, I mean, but the name is...
We're not even to the second lift hill yet.
Yeah. Well, hey, but at least the name's different, because at least we're not talking about those little tiny candies that they keep teasing us with, because
well, they brought back the name that they lost when the Kentucky Kingdom and Astroworld rides closed down, so at least they're kind of bringing that back anyways.
That's kind of cool. Okay, so moving along to our next park was Six Flags Over Texas. So let's start that clock again, and I actually think this is one of the more interesting additions on this entire lineup, that we get 3 new flat rides, none of which are a Larson Looper, which I find to be amazing. We have a Frisbee-style ride that sounds like a Hoos Frisbee-style ride. We have a Troika style ride. Well, the Frisbee's called the Riddler's Revenge, so they're reusing that name from Magic Mountain.
No, they're not. No, they're not. Look closely. None of those ride names are possessive, so it's called Riddler Revenge, Catwoman Whip, and Harley Quinn Spinsanity, not Harley Quinn's Spinsanity, not Riddler's Revenge, and not Catwoman's Whip. So technically, none of these names are reused. Am I the only one who's bothered by that? Am I the only one who's bothered by that?
That's strange.
I think you might be the only one who cares, to be honest with you.
No, because I've seen people on Facebook complaining about that, because we're used to saying Riddler's Revenge, we're used to saying Catwoman's Whip, the kitty coaster in New England. Now they're throwing that out the window and taking the apostrophe S off of everything. Did they get yelled at by DC Comics because that's not the name of the character?
Maybe.
Because they always say the Flash Pass, not Flash Pass.
I'll be honest with you. I think these 3 rides look outstanding. Like, I love when they theme like these flat rides to comic book heroes, and I think the Frisbee is going to have one of the more unique Frisbee looks, with the green and the question mark up at the top with the neon lights, it looks like. Catwoman, we don't really have. Now, Catwoman is going to be one of the new Enterprise style rides, I hear. Is that correct? That it's the new open air, floorless Enterprise.
Yes. I think that's kind of what it looks like. Now, I don't know if this is the new one that Huss has been working on, or if this is a Zamperla model, because Zamperla has a model that looks like that too. The Six Flags isn't very well known for doing work with Zamperla, but I don't know. I didn't see in the press release whether or not it said who was actually doing it yet. Because it doesn't look like the new Huss model. It doesn't look like that one.
It doesn't. It did not look like the new Huss model. You're correct in that, but I cannot find. I'm looking at the news release. I can't find a name for it. But then also we're getting the Spinsanity, the Harley Quinn, which is a traditional Troika ride, which I think is going to be.
So it's
awesome.
not a tilt-a-whirl.
It's not a tilt-a-whirl. This out of flat rides, this is, I think, the road Six Flags needs to go in general. More of this and less of other things. I like this edition. Maybe more so than a lot of other places. This is one of my favorite things on here, and I love the theme. I love the colors. I love the ride types. I love it. Dwayne, what do you think?
I'm a big fan of the disc ride. So anytime that they put in a Frisbee disc ride, that's, I really like the ones that I've ridden. So I'm interested to see what it looks like with the colors. I've been a huge fan of the Joker and Riddler from DC Comics. So anytime that they, use that for theming, I've always kind of intrigued, especially with the coaster we're going to talk about later, obviously. But and the whole Troika thing we saw the one that was themed for the Tilt-A-Whirl there this summer, and I thought that was excellently done. I mean, the painting, the actual eggshells. I mean, it was really well done, and I think that I kind of agree with you when it says that this is the way to go theme it after this, get people interested, get it to where it's good photo opportunities, and get it out there, because a lot of people like flat rides. I think some people, even who are coaster enthusiasts, say, I need a break from coasters every once in a while. Give me something else. Give me some variety.
So that time we lost to the Beast, but I like you said, I like this. So moving on to the next park, we only have 5 parks left here, and this next one is going to be La Ronde, and let's start that clock. And La Ronde next year is getting Arab Mavel for the 2016 season. I mean. Le Vampire backwards. It's not Arab Mavel. It's Vampire backwards. So now, a lot of people, you, Danny, said
it's a lot harder to say than Namtab, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. But I'm the first one to do it, so there you go.
Le Vampire, French Canadian for the Batman.
The Batman.
New to you, going backwards in 2016. If you go to La Ronde.
So you
Nobody
say
does.
A lot of people say that this one is the best of the Batman clones. So does that mean that this one's going to induce the most dizziness out of all of them? Because this one was pretty intense.
This one was very intense. I was actually very impressed with Le Vampire, and it quickly became my favorite Batman clone. And not even because it was number 450 for me, so it was a little bit of a milestone for me in that regard. But I think I was caught off guard by it. It was very smooth, very intense. But then I don't know if this was going on when you were there, but like as you come out of the last corkscrew, or you go out of the last corkscrew, you go down into a trench, which was completely filled with fog. And I totally didn't see it during the ride because we rode in the back row on our first ride. And that entire second half of the ride was kind of like sort of foggy and misty, and I didn't notice it on the first ride because we were in the back, and then we went into that trench, and I was like, holy crap, because you get so used to just going over a parking lot or going over gravel or going over grass that when you go into a trench filled with fog, it really surprises you on that. So we rode it back up front, and the entire second half of the ride was kind of shrouded in mist. And that trench, it literally is filled right to the top of the trench, and it looks as if you're just going to go right into concrete because the mist is just above the level of the concrete trench. So it's almost even with the ground. So you can't see like what you're going into or anything. And I got some great pictures of it too from the midway. So I think, I mean, hey, I've ridden when it was backwards at Great America, and I rode it at Great Adventure, or, we've done these before. Magic Mountain had one. Georgia got one. So, a lot of people know what this is like now. So they're getting their chance.
Are you going back for the extra credit? Are you going to go back to La Ronde next year? No, you're going to miss out, though. How are you going to get the extra credit? Idiot. Dwayne, to you.
I'll wait till it comes back around in 10 years. Notice I didn't even give you ammunition for an argument.
Yes, I was waiting. That's why I didn't say anything. I have not had the opportunity to ride one backwards, so
you're missing out.
Well,
they're cool.
They're fun. Most people who get off say that they would go straight to the trash can. So that's all that I needed to know. I mean, if it's really that bad, but
I love it.
I really miss, because I remember growing up and riding the racer when it was backwards. I miss it because there's nothing around now that goes backwards.
Yeah.
The last time I went backwards was riding. No, I hate that ride. I don't ride that ride.
Seriously, if you don't like that ride, you probably won't like Batman. But I'll admit that,
that's true.
That the Batman backwards is not meant to be marathoned. It's like a one and done type deal, but it's a lot of fun for the one or maybe 2-3 times you do it in a day. It's not something you can ride, which I don't think it's meant to be. So,
well, I enjoyed going backwards. I enjoyed fire. That's going backwards for me.
Yeah, that's a good one to go backwards on.
Okay, so moving along to Six Flags New England. Let's start that clock once again. And we have Fireball another Larson loop. But I think the bigger
Sir, that going here?
Yeah, exactly. I think the bigger story with New England is the returning of Bizarro to the Superman theme. However, I'm going to be honest with you, this one was a bit of a letdown when I read it. I was really excited about this because I thought that Bizarro would be getting new trains, and from the press release, it does not seem that is the case. That in the press release, it says that there will be audio throughout the entire ride, which kind of implies to me that they're just repainting the trains and not putting new trains on. You know, I guess there's a possibility that they could be getting new trains with audio. I just find that to be unlikely to get new trains, new audio system,
well,
and
they said it's going to be new audio, too.
Yeah,
it's going to be like the superhero audio like it used to be, so...
I want new...
You want new restraints is what you want.
Restraints. I don't want those restraints that... And you know what? To me, Dwayne, I think you're going to echo the same sentiment here because you had nothing but trouble with the restraints on Ride of Steel. And these restraints are even worse than that, in my opinion, that they are the worst restraints in the history of restraints. Maybe the only worst ones are the Togo stand-ups because of the butterfly that you almost have to break your neck to get out of. Dwayne, any thoughts?
And having a bicycle seat rammed into your crotch at the same time simultaneously while having your chest crushed. Yeah. But at any rate, you know, we've said our due diligence on the fireball thing, so I don't think we need to really rehash that at all. As far as this goes, you know, the talk has been that the general manager or president, you know, people always said we want to bring the S back. That's kind of been the talk of the town for years, that eventually it was going to happen, and now it's happening. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go with the audio. Are they going to it sounds like they're going to go with an actual superhero-themed audio instead of the soundtrack, which personally I kind of like the soundtrack that's on there now is Bizarro. I mean, it's kind of like on X2. What gets you pumped up more to ride a roller coaster than going up the lift hill backwards and hearing Enter Sandman by Metallica? It's kind of like, what gets you more pumped up on a lift hill than Led Zeppelin and AC/DC and Eminem and, you know, Disturbed? I mean, you know, great, you know, good music from different generations kind of all thrown into one thing. It kind of pumps me up, and maybe it's because I'm, you know, a hockey player used to hearing music while I'm warming up. It's just kind of my thing. I know some people hate the audio, and some people, you know, swore that ride off and like never again would they ride it. I know the restraints is a big topic of discussion. I am not as, you know, hard on the restraints as some people are. I know bigger people, taller people like Dwayne especially have a lot of problems with them, and I've seen a lot of tall people not get on because of them. Me being a shorter guy, maybe it doesn't bother me as much. I know my sister's about my height, and she didn't think they were anything bad. Sue over here didn't have any problem with the Bizarro restraints, so I don't know. We'll have to see. Hopefully there is some sort of change in that regard to make it a bit more comfortable for everyone, but it's kind of not looking that way. So we'll see. And interesting that it's Superman the Ride and not going back to Superman Ride of Steel.
Yeah, I think that's a good move. Dwayne, any thoughts for a few seconds here?
I haven't. I didn't get to ride of Steel, and that's the issue was because of the restraints. I mean, but I wanted to ride Bizarro because everyone says it's a great coaster, and so that was something that. And you said it wasn't that great, Andy. So I just want to say it's got mixed reviews, and I'll never get to know. I mean, unless they change restraints, I'll never get to know anyway. So I don't have anything to say about it because I'll never get to know.
Yeah. Okay. Moving along. Oh man, this is we're in it now, aren't we? Okay, the next park is Six Flags Great Adventure. Let's start that clock. And we got the early leak on this one of Total Mayhem the night before. We saw the video leak on YouTube, but now we see it made official. Total Mayhem, essentially a clone of Batman the Ride from Fiesta, Texas. You know what? It's probably a great ride, but a lot of people were expecting a lot more from this. I think this is that classic case of anticipation. People had, people talking about S&S, 4D coasters. People said, a premier dual launch thing. People had so many great ideas of what to do in this space. Or even an S&S free fly that's taller, extended, more stuff involved. But to get a clone of the one at Fiesta, I think there's a lot of people disappointed tonight. That's just my opinion. Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, you're definitely right. There are a lot of people disappointed with this. I mean, at the end of the day, Six Flags Great Adventure is about the big roller coasters. It's not about the little dinky ones. I mean, I think Magic Mountain realized that they made a mistake when they added Green Lantern First Flight, because that's kind of like a hit or miss ride. It's a very gimmicky ride. You can have a really good ride on that, or you can have a really, really bad one on it. And I had a good one on it a few years ago. We had a very bad one this past year, and it was painful. I did not like it at all the second time around. It's just, yeah, the restraints were absolutely terrible. Now, the ones on these are a little bit nicer. They're kind of like the B&M Wing Coaster Best, so maybe that'll alleviate some of that. But the thing that I always come back to is Great Adventure has some rides that are designed to be very high capacity, and they're not because the operators are very, very slow. I cannot fathom how long the lines will be for this thing, because unlike El Diablo, people will look at this and realize that, yes, it is a roller coaster, and this is a legitimate roller coaster, and it's gimmicky, and it's something completely different as opposed to just going upside down. So at the end of the day, this is going to have extremely long lines, and it's going to be a giant nightmare to try and ride. So I'm going to ride it, and I don't know how many times I'm going to ride it. I'm certainly not going to ride it more than once when I'm there, because it's just not going to be worth waiting in, who knows how long of a line for it. But maybe it'll keep people away from some of the other rides like El Toro and Nitro and King to Con, and I can get more rides on those. But, really disappointed that it wasn't. If they were going to do a free fly, at least they didn't kind of take a risk and go bigger. Six Flags, go big. That's their thing. Do something a little different. Take a chance with Great Adventure. The concept works. Do something a bit more exciting. So I don't know, Dwayne.
Well, I want to experience it because I've never experienced the 4D like this before, and I kind of called this one because I know a couple of friends of mine, we were discussing this off air, and then a couple other friends off the site, and they were arguing with me. They're saying, "Oh no, it's going to be something big. It's going to be something more like that you see out at Magic Mountain or whatever." And I'm like, no, because they haven't teased it. If they were going to do something big, you would think, and I know Six Flags isn't big into the teasing idea, but you'd think they've done something more with it, but they just didn't, and there really wasn't a lot out there. And so I just said, you know what? If the rumors are true and it's going to be an S&S, it's going to be the clone. It's going to be the exact same thing that we're going to see that we saw down at Fiesta. It's going to go up here. And you talked about the nightmare it's going to be in lines with the capacity. There's no doubt. I mean, I can just imagine I've seen the lines, down there in Fiesta, Texas.
It's a terrible choice for that park. It's not a terrible choice. It's a terrible choice for that park.
Yeah. So the next park we're going to look at is Fiesta, Texas, coincidentally. So let's start that clock once again. Not doing too well against the Beast tonight, but that's okay. We have another three flat rides here. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of any of these things. A Larson loop called the Fireball again. We've talked about that ad nauseum at this point. A standard disco, not the extended disco, so this one will not count on my track record. And and the most interesting thing that we got is probably not all that interesting at the end of the day, but it's a new modern tilt-a-whirl that's basically a standard tilt-a-whirl just with new carriages. So instead of having the big hood over your head like you've seen on every tilt-a-whirl since you've been little, this one is completely open air with these little cars, same ride movement, same idea. I don't know. I don't like this one. I thought what Over Texas was getting was going to be more in line what Fiesta Texas was getting. I thought with maybe the substitution of the Larson Loop for like the Troika or for the new style Enterprise. I thought Fiesta Texas was getting a new Frisbee because they took out their old Frisbee that had a lot of issues. Maybe they're waiting to do that. I don't know. But these three rides, I don't feel any of them. And why aren't they going with the extended disco? The extended discos are so much more fun. Like, the discos are fun. You rode one down at Dollywood, Dwayne. We liked it. But the extended discos are just so much more fun, I think. And I don't know. You guys can take it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of reminded me of what Over Georgia did last year. It was just kind of like, it was exactly what you would expect. The one thing that kind of caught me off guard with this is that, we're plugging our DC characters here with Six Flags this year, especially, Superman coming back. We're going to talk about Joker, the flat rides of Six Flags Over Texas. And then it's like, all of a sudden, what happened to the DC Comics branding on these rides here? Well, it's like now we just have Spin Sanity. So I get that it's at the boardwalk, but like that hasn't really stopped them before.
It's almost as if they didn't want to impede on what Over Texas was doing. That they said, okay, Over Texas is getting the DC stuff. We'll just do generic stuff because there's a lot of overlap there, and maybe they thought it would cause too much confusion if they used
if we
the
call
same
it
names
Harley Quinn Spin Sanity
and have it be have it be a different
what are their
ride.
names?
The
Fireballs, Harley Quinn's. Spin Sanity, and Fiesta Texas. What's the other name?
It's Fireball, just Spin Sanity, and then you have Hurricane Force 5.
That's right. That's the disco.
So, Dwayne, any thoughts on this one?
That's interesting.
Yeah, Hurricane Force 5. That's not something you'd think of. I mean, I guess it is down south, so in Texas. So I guess that does make a little more sense. But no, to be honest with you, I don't have anything because none of that interests me. So just move on, please.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm so tired of Fireball.
So there we go. We beat the Beast, though. We beat the Beast. Well done, guys. Well done. Okay, so for this last park, we're actually, because it's the end of the night here, and at any good park, hopefully you hope if you're on that last train of the night and you pull into the station, you want a double ride. You want to be sent out right back again to get one more ride for the last part.
Let's go again. One more time.
And that's what we're going to do here. We're doing a double ride for the Joker for Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. So for an unprecedented first time on any Beat the Beast show, we are going to do an 8-minute and 20-second ride cycle. Two trips through the Beast. Let's start it up. There you go. There's the clock. Let's talk about the Joker. Now, I thought that this one was more interesting than maybe the other ones because it's on the GCI model. So because you have the GCI base, I think it's really interesting to see what they're doing here. And I thought it was interesting that they kept a lot of the GCI elements. They made some more intense here and there, but they kept a lot of the structure. That this one doesn't seem like it's being cut away like we've seen every other RMC do. That you look at what happened with Texas Giant, Iron or Rattler, Colossus, Cyclone. Pretty much those structures have been cut away to the bare bones. But Roar, you still see a lot of Roar in this coaster, and I thought that was pretty interesting. But on the flip side of that, I do want to say that this actually looks slow in the video, whereas Wicked Cyclone last year looked hella quick and ended up being slow. So now my fear is that I probably might be making a trip out to Discovery Kingdom next year, and it looks like it could have, that brand new element that Wicked Cyclone has that I like to call the valley sensation of where you think you're going to valley at the end of the ride.
The Valley Hills.
Yeah.
Ironically enough.
So, Danny, I think you'd probably be best able to talk about, since you love GCI, you love RMC. Why don't you talk about this and what you thought?
See, here's the thing. When I went out to Discovery Kingdom in 2012 and rode Roar, I really liked Roar. I thought it was, standard GCI in a good way. Good airtime, good directional changes, good speed, kept it all the way through, pretty smooth. 2014. Was it 2014 already? Yeah. 2 years ago now when we went back. Roar just seemed a lot rougher to me than I remembered it being. I mean, the airtime was still good. The speed was still pretty good, but it seemed really rough. But they were retracking parts of it. They had retracked the first drop and the first turn, so it was kind of like, they're kind of maintaining it. Like, it caught me by surprise when we heard that this was shutting down for, Rocky Mountain treatment. Now, I think they're raising the hill by 5 feet. I think Roar originally was 95, and this is supposed to be 100. But that's that's kind of small when you consider the types of elements that this is going to be doing. And they did keep the vertical profile of Roar a bit more on this one than they have in some of the others. They have that 0G stall where it used to be an airtime hill, so it's a little higher up there. The turnaround that crosses over the lift is a little bit higher. So maybe that's going to help it in the long run to maintain some of that speed towards the end of the ride, because the Wicked Cyclone stays close to the ground very, very early on in the track. And that's part of the reason why I think it dies out, because it doesn't have those big drops in the middle of the ride to kind of pick its pace back up again.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes down to Joker, which I'm kind of baffled that there isn't some sort of subtitle to this ride, by the way, like Joker Steel Coaster or something. They're just straight up calling it the Joker. So I don't know. We'll have to see where that goes. But this is going to be one that I'm going to be cautiously optimistic about, because it is a slightly different style. It's not ground hugging early on in the course. It kind of waits till the midpoint. So I'm going to hope that maybe it has a little bit better pacing to it. Wicked Cyclone, I found that if you ride in the back row or towards the back, it does feel like it gets very, very slow at the end. Still has good airtime because the hills are very small. If you sit in the front row, I think the sensation of speed, having the wind blow in your face is greater in the front seat. You still get good airtime, and I think the first drop is better in the back on Wicked Cyclone, yes, but I think the overall ride is a little bit better in the front because that sensation of speed is still there a little bit. So maybe they've learned a bit of something from Wicked Cyclone, and maybe they'll improve upon that with Joker here. So we'll have to see. We're not really going to be able to get a good idea of how it's running until we see test runs, but we won't get the best idea until we ride it. And Andy, I think you might be the first one of the three of us to kind of have a chance to do that, because I probably won't be going out to California next year. So we'll see where it goes. So what about you, Dwayne, here on Joker?
Well, I guess one thing we haven't talked about is really the theme and the painting of it. I mean, we're going to see the two color track, which I thought was in the video looks really interesting. I mean, it really brings out the Joker colors. I think that'll be something.
Mayhem is the two colors too. The red and yellow.
So I think that I think that's going to be like a big thing too. And I'm really anxious to see what it looks like on a GCI. I got a chance to ride a couple of GCIs for the first time in my life actually this summer. I know that's kind of strange, and I really like them. And so I'm anxious to see what RMC does, because I got a chance to ride an RMC from the ground up with Goliath there at Great America. So I see, just like when I talked about before with the dark ride here, it seems like now the RMC is really becoming the big thing here in America. It's starting to get to all of the parks. And I know it's all Six Flags right now, and I'm really wondering if another company like Cedar Fair is ever going to pick up on that, because it's been rumored, but we haven't really seen any of that. So, I think with Mayhem and, of course, this one out there, I want to get to California sometime, and eventually I'm going to. But the video, that was the biggest thing that stood out to me, was it looked really slow. And I've never seen Roar, to be honest, but it does look really slow.
Well, I'll be honest. Wicked Cyclone last year looked real fast in the video, and I tend to believe that they sped it up to make it look faster than what it was. So maybe this is – so I think if we saw a point-of-view video today of Wicked Cyclone, that would match a lot more what this Joker ride matches. So I'm just hoping that this video that we saw is more closely related to what we actually get in the end. I like the colors. I like the way that this coaster looks from a sky perspective, an overview looking down. It looks like it has a great profile. I lost my mind last year over Wicked Cyclone when we did the most anticipated rides. I lost my mind over Wicked.
We were so excited for it, and I think now we're cautiously optimistic about this because it's in that same style, and as long as it's not slow, I think we're gonna like it.
Yeah, and I'm not throwing my hat behind this one, and I'm hoping that it becomes a sleeper hit, that it actually turns out to be really well, because I really think that first drop with the twist looks really cool. A GCI first drop on a steel coaster might be a really cool concept. But I was burned too badly by Wicked Cyclone, and I know a lot of people out there, rant and rave about Wicked Cyclone, how great it is. I don't think it's that at all. I struggle to put it in my top 50, which is still an average ride, but no, seriously, you're telling me that SheiKra is not better than Wicked Cyclone? Get the hell out of here. The dive coasters are better. There are so many better rides out there than Wicked Cyclone. I don't even want to get into it, but this ride I'm going to be cautiously optimistic for. I'm probably going to get on it next week. A new timer there. Wow, there we go.
Different sound effect.
So, we obviously did not beat the Beast there, but you know what? I think tonight we were pretty productive. For as much as people are kind of crapping on this announcement, I think there's a lot of stuff here that's fairly good. It's not an overwhelming announcement. It's not something like, oh my God, look at what this park is getting. Look at what that park is getting. Look at what that park is getting. But seriously, my argument basically is, what chain does that anymore? Cedar Fair certainly doesn't. You have two parks that maybe get something significant, and then the rest of them get water park or kiddie rides or pipe screams. That's not how business is done nowadays. Here we have two big dark rides going in. We have an RMC conversion that's probably going to be pretty good, or at least it's going to be a good ride. No RMC is a bad ride, so it's going to be a good ride. The Total Mayhem might have been a disappointment, but it's probably still going to be a fairly decent ride from word coming out of Fiesta. And then I think Over Texas hit a home run with their three flat rides. Those are some of the three best flat rides I've seen put into one park in 1 year. That's pretty impressive in my book. So I'm not overly excited by the announcement, but I'm not saying it's the end of days either, like some people are.
No, I think at the end of the day we have to look at the whole package, and I think we got a big package from Six Flags last year when you think about it. We got Wicked Cyclone, we got Twisted Colossus, we got Batman the Ride, we got two Battle for Metropolis dark rides, and we got a bunch of Super Loops. So at the end of the day, you had to figure that maybe a slightly less costly year was coming from them. And, we're seeing one RMC, and we're seeing them cut it down by one Rocky Mountain conversion is essentially what we're seeing. They're trading in one of the two Rocky Mountain conversions for more flat rides, because we're still getting 4 Super Loops. we're getting the free fly, we're getting one RMC, and now we're getting a bunch of flat rides in some of the other parks. So we're trading an RMC for a bunch of flat rides going into various parks, and that's kind of the way to look at it. So not quite as spectacular as last year, but it has potential if the dark rides are operating and Joker can perform like we know the RMCs can, then I think that Six Flags could still have a pretty good year overall, despite not having the real punch in the face in terms of announcements.
Dwayne, any final thoughts? Yeah,
I think we just need to look at it for what it is. I mean, if I look at announcements for 2016, it seems to be that way across the board, no matter what company we're talking about. I mean, it's 2015 was big for Six Flags. It was big for Cedar Fair too. You have Fury 325. I mean, it's not like people are to me, they see these big things and they expect it every year. But how can you expect? And I know they're multi-million-dollar companies who make buku money every year, but you can't do it. You got land issues, you got extension issues, you've got height issues, things you've got to deal with that people, enthusiasts are like, I want more, I want bigger, I want better. Well, you really can't do that every year. And I think that these companies are doing the best they can with what they are, or what's put in front of them. And I think we should just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah. Well, I think on that note, we're gonna leave for this evening. Hopefully, you enjoyed our take on all the announcements for Six Flags across the nation and across into Mexico as well. We had a great time doing this for the first time ever, bringing together both shows of Uncut and Beat the Beast. I think it went really well. Had some great insight from all three of us. So on that note, I think it's time for us to bid our adieu. I am, of course, Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Danny Miller from Rochester, New York.
And I'm Dwayne Sponseller from Parkersburg, West Virginia. And may the Q lines be ever in your favor.
And right on, Ride Warriors.
See you next time.